This is part 4, writing percents as fractions, and on this video we write each of the following percents as fractions. This is percents part 4. In percents part 3, we started writing percents as fractions, but we didn't do any problems like this yet. 5 1/3%. That's where we left off. And so how do we deal with that? Well, remember, percent means out of 100, which means you can divide by 100. So one thing you can do is replace the percent sign with divide by 100. So 5 1/3, instead of writing the percent sign, you could write divide by 100. Now, in the previous video, we did whole number type problems like 22%, and remember we were able to just put 22 over 100 and then reduce it. And we could do that here with 5 1/3, but you would get a complex fraction. So you can still write 5 1/3 over 100, but you're going to have to simplify that complex fraction and still reduce it. So if you have a mixed number like this with a percent, it's probably easier to go ahead and write 5 1/3 divided by 100 to begin. All right, now how do we do this? How do we do 5 1/3 divided by 100? Well, there are two things I have to do. When you're multiplying and dividing with fractions, we want to rewrite the improper fractions. The mixed numbers as improper fractions. So this 5 1/3 we need to write as an improper fraction. So that's 3 times 5 plus 1, 16/3. So that's one thing you have to do. You need to change the mixed number to an improper fraction. At least this is one way to do division with fractions. And then how do you divide with fractions? Well, if you're dividing by 100, remember that means to multiply by the reciprocal. This is for what you know about fractions. And if you need help with that, see my videos on fractions. All right, so what this changes to, basically, check it out. We had 5 1/3%. Look at what I ended up with. I ended up writing 16/3 times 1 over 100. Okay, now you could do this first step, 5 1/3 divided by 100, or you can go directly to this step by changing the mixed number to an improper fraction, and instead of writing dividing by 100, go ahead and write times 1 over 100. That's your choice if you want to go directly to this step. Sometimes I remember to go times 1 over 100 because I'm trying to change it to a fraction, so I'm going to multiply it by the fraction. Okay, so dividing by 100 is multiplying by the fraction 1 over 100. All right, so in any case, we get 16/3 times 1 over 100, and now we could reduce. So what goes into 16 and 100? 4 goes into both of those numbers. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So now we multiply across the top. 4 times 1 is 4, and 3 times 25 is 75. And 5 1/3% actually equals 4/75. So we learned how to do it. 5 1/3% is the same thing as 4/75. Those are equal. So this is written in percent form. This is written as a fraction. So I'm changing the percent to a fraction. It would be difficult to change 5 1/3% to a decimal. You would have to round it if you wanted to write it in complete decimal form. All right, let's do another problem. Write 12.5% as a fraction. Now you may say, well, I'm already looking at a fraction, 12.5. What I'm saying here is I want you to also change it from something percent to just a fraction. So again, we've got two things going on here. We have the 12.5, which we want to write as just an improper fraction, and we need to get rid of that percent sign by dividing by 100 or writing it as times 1 over 100. All right, So first of all, let's go ahead and do the step that we don't have to do, but if you want, you could say, well, this means 12.5 divided by 100. Okay, this is the optional step if you want to write that down first. Or you can go directly to this step, which is write 12.5 as an improper fraction. 2 times 12 is 24 plus 1 is 25 halves. And then remember what divide by 100 means? It means times 100ths. So if you were going to go directly to this step, okay, what you do is you write 12.5 as an improper fraction, 25 halves, and then percent means times 1 over 100. Since you're trying to write it as a fraction, you're multiplying it by the fraction 1 over 100. Okay, and now we can reduce it. So what goes into both 25 and 100? 25 does. So divide the top by 25, divide the bottom by 25, and don't forget the numerator, you have 1 times 1, so this is going to be 1 over 2 times 4 is 8. So 12.5% is the same thing as the fraction 1/8. So if you're buying something and it was 12.5% off, it would be 1/8 of the cost would be off. That's sort of what that means. Here's a problem for you to try. Put the video on pause and write 6 2/3% as a fraction. Okay, let's do it. Well, okay, remember, that just means 6 2/3, right? And this just means divide by 100. That's the optional step. Or you can go directly to writing 6 2/3 as an improper fraction, which is 20/3. Remember how we do that? 3 times 6 plus 2 is the numerator. It's times 1 over 100. And now we reduce again. Dividing the top 20 by 20 is 1. Dividing 100 by 20 is 5. So my answer is 1/15. So 6 2/3% is actually equal to the fraction 1/15. Okay, so here's the shortcut. If you don't want to write the middle step here, that's the optional step. If somebody gives you 6 2/3%, you could first write this as 20/3. That's just changing the 6 2/3 to a fraction, but you still have to deal with the percent. Now, you're trying to write it as a fraction, so multiply by the fraction, which is 1 over 100. Cancel. And multiply the numerator and denominator together. So that's a little bit shorter way of writing it if you get the idea. You have to remember to do two things, though. So where a lot of people make mistakes, they'll just write 20/3. But you have to deal with that percent. You're also trying to change the percent sign to a fraction, so multiply by the fraction, 1 over 100. All right, write each as a fraction. So go ahead and do these two problems. The first one, 14%, no fraction even to begin with, and 13 1/3% happens to have a fraction. So put the video on pause and try these two. Okay, for the first one, you could directly write this as 14 divided by 100 as a fraction and then reduce it. But if you wanted, you could do it the same way I just showed you how to do these other problems. You're trying to write it as a fraction. You could write 14 as a fraction, 14 over 1 if you want, and then change your percent sign by writing it by the fraction 1 over 100, and then reducing. Oops, I wrote 7 over 100. I wasn't thinking. That's going to be 50. And then we cancel here. 2 goes into both numbers. 7/50. Okay, so same answer. So if it's just a whole number with a percent, most people like to just write the number over 100. It's simpler and then reduce it. But you could use the same method as I'm going to do here with the 13 and a third percent, which is to write that as a fraction first, which is the improper fraction, 40 thirds times, and I'm trying to write it as a fraction, 1 over 100. So you're multiplying by the fraction. The only thing is when you see 14 up here, remember you could always write it as 14 over 1. Okay, so I'm just changing and writing that as an improper fraction too. Same method if you'd like. Okay, now let's reduce. So I have 40 and I've got 100. What goes into both those numbers? The biggest one is 20. You might not pick the biggest one, but just keep reducing as much as you can. So 40 divided by 20 is 2, and 100 divided by 20 is 5. So what does that give me in the numerator? 2/15. Here's one more problem for you to try. Write 83 1/3% as a fraction. So put the video on pause and try it on your own first. Okay, let's go for it. We've got 83 1/3%. So I need to change the 83 1/3 to an improper fraction. So I have to do 3 times 83, which is 249, and add 1. That's 250 thirds. That's how I write 83 1/3. But then I have the percent sign. You got to multiply by 100th. And now what number goes into each of these? 50. So 250 divided by 50 is 5. 100 divided by 50 is 2. So this is 5/6. So 83 1/3% is the same as 5/6. That should make sense to you because 100%, remember, is 1. Because that's just 100 over 100. Right? So 100% is 1. 83 1/3% is going to be close to 1, but still less than 1. So 5/6 is getting pretty close to 1. All right. One more video where we're going to do a few problems where we might have some decimals and some fractions mixed together. And we're going to rewrite those as fractions. So see my next video on percents.